Supreme Commander stood at the center of his war room, his four arms folded behind his back. The massive before him showed a map of the galaxy. One small section glowed red. Human space. He looked at it the way a giant might look at an insect. "They refused," said Admiral, his voice filled with disbelief. "The humans actually refused our demands." Let out a slow breath through his gills. They had ruled the Orion Arm for 6,000 years. 12 species served under their banner. They had crushed rebellions, conquered empires, and burned worlds that dared to resist. And now, a species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel 3 centuries ago was telling them no. "Read their response again," said. Look down at his. "They said, we belong to no one. Our worlds are our own. If you want them, come and take them." Laughter erupted around the war room. Officers of 6 different species found it amusing. The humans had a fleet of 6,000 ships. The hegemony could gather 40,000 in a single location. This was not a war. This was pest control. But one person in the room did not laugh. Was old. She was the oldest still serving in any official position. Her scales had faded to gray and her eyes were clouded with age. But her mind remained sharp. She was the royal historian, keeper of records going back, and she had spent the last 2 years studying Earth's radio broadcasts, their literature, their history. She was afraid. "Supreme Commander," she said quietly, "I advise caution." Turned to look at her. Caution, against a species that still uses kinetic weapons, against creatures who cannot even regenerate lost limbs. "Against creatures who do not need to," replied. "They simply continue fighting without them." The room fell silent for a moment, then waved his upper right hand dismissively. "You worry too much, old one. Assemble the fleet. We will gather at the nexus of it is the gateway to their space. When they see our full strength, they will kneel." The order went out across the hegemony. Ships from 12 species began to move. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, carriers holding thousands of fighters, destroyers, cruisers, and battleships beyond counting. They came from 100 worlds, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in hegemony history. Watched the ships arrive at over the following weeks. The Nexus was a point where several hyperspace lanes met. Any fleet attacking hegemony space from Earth would have to pass through here. It was a perfect place for a trap. Reports came in daily. The humans were preparing their own fleet. Intelligence officers laughed at the numbers. 6,000 ships against 40,000. The humans were brave, they admitted. Brave and stupid. Broadcast his ultimatum across all frequencies, making sure the humans would hear it. "People of Earth," he said, his voice cold and commanding, "you have been given a chance to join the hegemony peacefully. You have refused. Now you will learn the price of your arrogance. Surrender your worlds, your resources, and your people to our rule, or you will be annihilated. Every man, woman, and child on your planets will burn. This is your final warning." He expected panic. He expected pleading. He expected the weak human government to finally see reason and submit. What he received was a single sentence. "We're on our way." Stared at the message for a long time. Then he began to laugh. His officers joined him. The entire war room filled with the sound of their amusement. The humans were coming to fight. Good. It would save the hegemony the trouble of hunting them down. Only remained silent. She had returned to her quarters after the meeting and pulled up the files she had been studying. Earth's history. She had read it all. Every war, every conflict, every horror that humans had inflicted upon each other. She read about the trenches of the First World War, where millions died for a few miles of mud. She read about the Second World War, where humans built factories for the sole purpose of killing other humans. She read about nuclear weapons, about cities turned to ash in single moments. But what frightened her most was not the destruction. It was what came after. The humans who had dropped nuclear bombs on Japan became Japan's closest allies within decades. The nations that had torn Europe apart joined together into a union. Enemies became friends. Killers became healers. Soldiers who had seen the worst of humanity went home and built schools and hospitals. Did not understand it. No species in the hegemony had ever behaved this way. When they conquered a world, they ruled it forever. When they crushed a rebellion, they ensured that no one would ever rebel again through fear and punishment. They did not forgive. They did not forget. Humans did both. She pulled up a recording she had found in Earth's archives. It showed a human soldier, old and gray, meeting another old man at some kind of ceremony. They had fought on opposite sides of a war that had killed millions. They had tried to kill each other. Now they were embracing like brothers. Watched the recording 3 times. She tried to understand the look in their eyes. It was not weakness. It was not surrender. It was something else, something she had no word for in her language. She thought about the human response to the ultimatum. We're on our way. Not we surrender, not please spare us, not even we will fight to the death. Just a simple statement, a promise, almost casual, as if they were talking about a trip to a nearby market rather than a battle against the greatest military force in the galaxy. Closed her files and sat in the darkness of her quarters. The fleet around her hummed with confidence and eagerness for battle. 40,000 ships, millions of soldiers, the might of 12 species. And somewhere out there, a small human fleet was coming to meet them. She remembered an old Earth saying she had found in her research. It came from a human general, speaking about an enemy that refused to break no matter how hard they were hit. I am afraid, the general had written, that we have awakened a sleeping giant. Wondered if the hegemony had done the same thing. She wondered if, in all his arrogance, understood what was coming. She suspected that he did not. She suspected that none of them did. The human fleet was coming, and something told her that when it arrived, everything would change. The alarms began screaming across every ship in the hegemony fleet at exactly the same moment. Rushed to the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Officers were running to their stations, shouting reports across the room. The main flickered and then displayed the edge of the system. Points of light were appearing, dozens, hundreds, thousands. The humans have arrived, Admiral announced, his voice tight with anticipation. 6,200 ships as our intelligence predicted. Allowed himself a small smile. The humans were outnumbered nearly 7 to 1. This would not be a battle, it would be a slaughter. All ships move to attack formation, he commanded. We end this today. But the humans did not move. Their fleet hung in space at the edge of the system, engines powered down, weapons cold. They simply floated there, a cloud of metal and light against the stars. What are they doing? Asked. Narrowed his eyes. Perhaps they have finally realized their mistake. Perhaps they are preparing to surrender. But surrender was not what came. Instead, every communication channel in the hegemony fleet suddenly burst to life. Every screen, every speaker, every personal device began receiving the same transmission. It cut through encryption like it did not exist. It overrode every attempt to block it. And it showed them Earth. The first images were of war. Watched as strange vehicles rolled across muddy fields, belching fire. Human soldiers ran through smoke and chaos, their primitive weapons spitting metal at each other. Bodies lay in trenches filled with water and blood. The scale was enormous, thousands dying for tiny patches of ground. What is this? Someone whispered. The images kept coming. Cities burning, bombs falling from the sky like rain, humans fighting humans with a ferocity that made the hegemony's wars look like polite disagreements. One recording showed a massive explosion, a cloud shaped like a mushroom rising over a destroyed city. The number of dead appeared on screen, over 100,000 killed in a single moment. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion had gone silent. More images followed. Camps where humans were systematically killed by other humans, mass graves, starving children behind barbed wire. A number appeared, 6 million dead in one campaign alone. They did this to their own kind, said, his voice barely above a whisper, with weapons less advanced than ours. Said nothing, he could not look away from the screen. The broadcast continued. It showed war after war, century after century. Humans had been fighting each other since they first picked up rocks and sticks. They had never stopped. They had only gotten better at it. But then something changed. The images of death gave way to something else. Soldiers, the same soldiers who had been killing each other, were now treating each other's wounds. Enemies were shaking hands over tables covered with documents. Cities that had been destroyed were being rebuilt, and the people doing the rebuilding were the same ones who had destroyed them. A recording showed two old men meeting at a memorial. One had been a prisoner of war, tortured for years. The other had been one of his guards. They were embracing each other, tears running down their faces. Felt something cold settle in his stomach. Another clip showed a human woman standing before a massive crowd. She spoke about forgiveness, about moving forward, about refusing to let hatred define the future. The crowd cheered. The broadcast shifted to show human soldiers arriving in countries they had once bombed, but they were not carrying weapons. They were carrying food, medicine, and building materials. They were greeted not with fear, but with gratitude. They rebuild what they destroy, his voice came over the command channel. They make allies of their enemies. This is what makes them dangerous, Supreme Commander, not their weapons, their ability to choose. Finally found his voice. Silence this broadcast, jam their signals. Officers rushed to obey, but nothing worked. The human transmission cut through everything. Now it showed humanity united. Ships being built, colonies spreading across distant worlds. Different races and nations that had once slaughtered each other now working side by side. The message was clear. Humans had learned to stop fighting each other. And that meant all of their fury, all of their terrible capacity for war, was now pointed outward. A final recording played. A human admiral stood on the bridge of a massive warship. She was speaking directly to the camera. "We know what we are," she said. "We know what we have done to each other. We carry that weight every day. Every memorial, every grave, every scar on our history reminds us of what we are capable of. That is why we do not want war, because we know exactly how good we are at it." She paused, and her eyes seemed to look directly at. "We came here to show you what you are asking for. We came to give you a chance to walk away. Because if you force us to become what we once were, we will not stop until we have one. And we always win. Not because we are stronger or smarter, but because we do not know how to give up." The broadcast ended. Silence hung over the Eternal Dominion's bridge. Officers stared at their screens with wide eyes. Some of them were trembling. Stood frozen, the images still burning in his mind. He had expected primitive creatures, easily frightened, easily broken. Instead, he had seen a species that had perfected the art of destruction before the hegemony even existed. A new message appeared on his screen. It came from the human flagship, a vessel named Remember. The message was short. "We didn't come to fight. We came to show you what happens if you make us. The choice is yours." Looked out at his massive fleet. 40,000 ships, millions of soldiers, the greatest military force in the galaxy. And for the first time in his long career, he was not sure it would be enough. Because the humans were still not moving, they were just waiting, patient, calm. Ready, hours passed. The human fleet remained motionless. Had ordered his ships to hold position. He needed time to think, time to plan. But as the hours stretched on, he realized that time was not his ally. The broadcast had not stopped. New transmissions flooded every channel. They were no longer showing war. They were showing something far more dangerous. They were showing what humans did after war. On thousands of screens across the hegemony fleet, soldiers and officers watched in silence. They saw humans rebuilding cities they had bombed into rubble. They saw former enemies sitting together at dinner tables, laughing and sharing food. They saw children of soldiers who had killed each other playing together in parks. One recording showed a ceremony in a nation called Germany. An old human man was speaking. He was asking for forgiveness for crimes his country had committed generations ago. The people of another nation, the ones who had suffered most, were accepting his apology. They were crying together. "They forgive," whispered commander of the contingent. She stood on the bridge of her own ship, watching the broadcast with wide, dark eyes. They actually forgive. They were not like they had not joined the hegemony by choice. 2,000 years ago, they had conquered there. They had burned half the population. They had destroyed the government and placed puppet rulers in its place. They served the hegemony because they had no choice. They had never forgotten, and they had never been forgiven for fighting back. Now they watched humans do something they had never done. "Commander," said one of his officers, "there is a new broadcast. It is addressed to us, to all the subject species." Turned to her screen. A human woman appeared. She spoke in the language, perfectly accented as if she had been born on. "We know your history," the woman said. "We know what they did to your people. We know about the burned cities, the mass graves, the 2,000 years of occupation. We are sorry that you have suffered." Felt her throat tighten. "On Earth," the woman continued, "we also have a history of occupation. We also have conquerors and the conquered. We also have wounds that took centuries to heal. But we learned something important. The past does not have to control the future. Old enemies can become new friends. Chains can be broken." The woman leaned forward slightly. "We are not here to conquer you. We are here to offer you a choice. Fight for your masters and we will not judge you. We understand what it means to be forced into war. But know this. If you wish to talk, if you wish to find another way, we are listening. We have always believed that the hand extended in friendship is stronger than the fist raised in anger." The broadcast ended. Stood in silence. Around her, her officers were looking at each other. No one spoke, but she could see the question in their eyes. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, was dealing with his own problems. Reports were flooding in from across the fleet. Soldiers and officers wanted to know what to do. Some were afraid. Others were confused. A few were angry, demanding to attack the humans immediately. But the most troubling reports came from the subject species. They were not responding to commands. Neither were the or the. 3 species, thousands of ships, had simply stopped acknowledging orders from the command structure. "What is happening?" demanded. Admiral's face was grim. "They are watching the broadcast, Supreme Commander. The humans are speaking to them directly. They are offering them." He paused, as if the word was difficult to say. "They are offering them freedom." Slammed his fist against his command chair. "This is propaganda, lies designed to divide us. Order all ships to attack. We end this now." The order went out, but not all ships obeyed. The contingent broke formation. 1,200 ships moved away from the main fleet, positioning themselves between thee and the humans. "Commander's voice crackled over the communication channel. "You are disobeying a direct order. Return to formation immediately or you will be destroyed." His response came after a long pause. "We have served the hegemony for 2,000 years, Supreme Commander. We have bled and died for your wars. And in all that time, not once have you offered us what the humans are offering now." "And what is that?" "A choice." The channel went silent. Felt rage building in his chest. He turned to his weapons officer. "Target the ships. Fire on my command." But before the order could be given, 2 more species broke formation. The moved their ships to join the. Together, They numbered nearly 3,000 vessels. "We will not fire on allies," the commander announced. "We will not fire on anyone, not until we understand what is happening." Stared at his fleet, his perfect instrument of destruction, was falling apart before his eyes. And the humans had not fired a single shot. A new transmission arrived from the human flagship. It was from a human admiral named Supreme Commander, she said, her voice calm and measured. "We did not come here to start a war. We came to end one before it began. Your fleet is fracturing because your empire was built on fear, not loyalty. Fear only works as long as there is no alternative. We are offering an alternative." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Your subject species are not your enemies. They are victims who were never given a choice. We are giving them one now. You can try to hold your empire together with force. You can fire on your own allies. But every shot you take will prove our point. It will show everyone watching that the hegemony only knows how to destroy." Admiral leaned back in her chair. "We are still waiting, Commander. We will wait as long as it takes. Because unlike you, we understand that the greatest victory is the one that never requires a battle." Watched as more ships began to power down their weapons, not attacking, just waiting. He had planned for every possible strategy. He had prepared for ambushes, for tricks, for desperate last stands. He had not prepared for this. He had not prepared for an enemy that wanted to win without fighting. And slowly, terribly, he was beginning to realize that he had no idea how to stop them. The shuttle that left the human flagship was small and unarmed. It carried no weapons, no shields, and no military escort. It simply drifted across the empty space between the two fleets, a tiny point of light in the darkness. Every sensor in the hegemony fleet tracked its journey. Watched it approach the ships. He could destroy it with a single command. One small shuttle would vanish in a flash of fire, and perhaps that would remind everyone who was in charge. But he did not give the order. Because he knew, deep in his hearts, that destroying an unarmed shuttle would only prove everything the humans had been saying. The shuttle docked with Commander's flagship. A single human walked through the airlock. Her name was Hayes. She was 73 years old, with gray hair and lines around her eyes from a lifetime of smiling and crying. She wore no uniform, carried no weapons, and moved slowly because of the pain in her left knee that had never healed properly after an accident decades ago. She was the most dangerous weapon humanity had brought to this battle. Met her in the docking bay, surrounded by armed guards. The human woman looked at the weapons pointed at her and did not seem afraid. "Thank you for allowing me aboard," said, bowing slightly. "I know this took courage." Studied her carefully. "You came alone, unarmed. Either you are very brave or very foolish." "Perhaps both," replied with a small smile. "I wanted you to see that we mean what we say. We are not here to threaten. We are here to offer." "Offer what?" "Trade agreements, technology. These are things the hegemony has offered before. They always come with chains attached." Nodded slowly. "You are right to be suspicious, but let me tell you a story." She reached into her pocket and every guard tensed, but all she pulled out was a small photograph, old and faded. "This is my grandmother," said, holding up the image. It showed a young woman with dark hair and sad eyes. When she was 16 years old, she was taken from her home by soldiers. They put her in a camp. They tattooed a number on her arm. They worked her nearly to death. They killed her parents, her brothers, her friends. Listened in silence. The people who did this were humans, the same species as my grandmother, the same species as me. Looked down at the photograph. When the war ended, my grandmother could have spent her life hatting them. Many did. They had every right to. But she didn't. No, she became a teacher. She taught children about what happened, not so they would hate, but so they would understand. She said that hatred was a prison, and she refused to live in one. Put the photograph away and looked directly at The humans who ran those camps, who killed millions of innocent people, they are now our allies, our friends. We work together. We protect each other. We share meals and holidays and dreams for the future. She paused. That is what we are offering you, not just trade or technology. We are offering you the chance to stop being prisoners of the past. Felt something shift inside her chest. For 2,000 years, her people had carried their anger and grief like armor. It had kept them alive under rule, but it had also kept them trapped. How, she asked quietly, how do you let go of that much pain? Reached out and gently took his hand. The touch was warm and soft. One choice at a time, she said. One day at a time. It is not easy. It takes generations, but it is possible. We are proof of that. The conversation between them lasted 3 hours. When it ended, walked back to her shuttle personally. Then she broadcast a message to every ship in the system. This is Commander of the. I have spoken with the human ambassador. I believe her words are true. I believe that the humans offer something the hegemony never has: respect, partnership, and hope. Therefore, I am formally requesting negotiations with Earth. Within minutes, similar messages came from 8 other species. Stood on his bridge, watching his empire collapse. The ships that remained loyal to him numbered fewer than 4,000 now. The rest had either joined the humans or declared themselves neutral. Supreme Commander, Admiral said quietly, we cannot win this battle, not anymore. Said nothing. His hands gripped the arms of his command chair so tightly that his claws dug into the metal. The human fleet began to move. For a terrible moment, thought they were attacking. He opened his mouth to order his remaining ships to fight, to go down in flames rather than surrender. But the humans did not attack. They moved around his fleet. They formed a corridor, an open path leading away from the system, back toward space. A message arrived from Admiral. Supreme Commander, she said, you have lost, not to our weapons but to your own history. Your empire was built on fear and conquest. It could not survive the offer of something better. She paused and her voice softened slightly. Go home. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that the humans did not come to destroy but to offer. When you are ready to talk, truly talk, we will be waiting. There is a place for thee in the new galaxy we are building, but it will be as partners, not as masters. Stared at the open corridor. He could still fight. He could still die with honor. But what would that accomplish? His fleet was shattered. His allies had abandoned him. And the humans, the creatures he had dismissed as primitive and weak, had beaten him without firing a single shot. All ships, he said, his voice heavy with defeat, withdraw. As the remaining fleet moved through the corridor the humans had created, looked back at the ships of his former subjects. They were gathered around the human fleet like children around a protector. The hegemony was finished. And in its place, something new was beginning. 6 months had passed since the day the hegemony fell. The galaxy had changed more in those 6 months than it had in the previous 6,000 years. 9 species had signed the Sol Accords, a treaty of cooperation with humanity. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. There were no tribute demands, no forced labor, no military occupation. Instead, there were trade routes, cultural exchanges, and joint projects that benefited everyone involved. Human engineers worked alongside builders to construct new hospitals on worlds that had been neglected for centuries. Human doctors brought medicines that could cure diseases that had never bothered to treat. Human teachers opened schools where children learned not just facts, but how to think for themselves. Commander, now Ambassador, stood at the opening ceremony of the first joint research station. It floated in neutral space, staffed by scientists from 6 different species working together. She watched a child and a human child chasing each other through the corridors, laughing. She had never heard children laugh like that. It is strange, isn't it? Said a voice beside her. Turned to find Hayes standing nearby, leaning on a cane. The old human woman smiled at the playing children. "What is strange?" asked. "Peace. After so long without it, peace feels almost unnatural, like wearing new shoes that haven't been broken in yet. Consider this. My people have not known true peace for 2,000 years. I do not know if we remember how." Nodded slowly. "Humans forgot too many times. We had to learn again and again, but we always did eventually. You will too." Far away, on a cold moon at the edge of space, a very different conversation was taking place. Sat in a bare room in a small building that served as his exile home. He had been stripped of his rank, his titles, and his honor. The people blamed him for the fall of the hegemony. They did not understand that the hegemony had been falling for centuries. He had simply been the one holding it when it finally collapsed. A knock came at his door. He did not answer. He rarely answered anything these days, but the door opened anyway, and a familiar figure walked in. "Hayes." She carried 2 cups of something hot and placed one on the table beside him. "It is called tea," she said, sitting down across from him. "Humans drink it when we need to have difficult conversations." Looked at the cup but did not touch it. "Why are you here?" "Because you are suffering, and no one should suffer alone." He laughed bitterly. "I am your enemy. I threaten to destroy your species. Why would you care about my suffering?" Took a sip of her tea. "Because we learned a long time ago that enemies are just friends we haven't made yet. Because holding on to hatred only hurts the one who holds it. And because, frankly, I think you have spent your entire life serving a system that never actually worked, and I feel sorry for you." Stared at her. No one had ever spoken to him like this. Not with anger, not with fear, but with something he did not recognize. Something soft and strange. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Set down her cup. "Your people are confused. They have ruled through fear for 6,000 years, and now they do not know how to live any other way. They need someone to help them understand what is happening. Someone who was there when everything changed. Someone who can explain humanity to them." "You want me to work for you." "I want you to work with us. There is a difference." Was silent for a long moment. He looked down at his 4 hands, the hands that had signed orders sending millions to their deaths, the hands that had built an empire on bones and blood. "Why would you trust me?" he asked quietly. Smiled. "We don't. Not yet. Trust is earned, not given. But we believe in second chances. We believe that people can change. We have to believe that because we have seen it happen over and over again in our own history." She leaned forward. "You asked what we are. Back during the standoff I heard you asked your historian that question. I will tell you now, we are the species that refuses to give up on anyone, even ourselves, especially ourselves. We have made terrible mistakes. We have done horrible things, but we always try again. We always reach out one more time." She extended her hand toward him. "We are reaching out to you now. The question is, will you reach back?" He looked at her hand for a long time. Then slowly he took it. 1 year later, the anniversary of what people were calling the Silent Victory was celebrated across the galaxy. There were ceremonies and speeches and festivals on 100 worlds. But the moment that would be remembered most happened on a small colony world, far from the centers of power. A human ship landed in the central square of a city that had never seen human visitors. The ramp lowered, and out came volunteers carrying crates of medical supplies, teaching materials and food. A young girl stood at the edge of the crowd, watching with wide eyes. She had heard stories about the humans. Some said they were monsters. Some said they were saviors. She did not know what to believe. One of the humans, a young man with brown skin and a bright smile, noticed her watching. He walked over and knelt down so they were at the same height. "Hello," he said in careful, "what is your name?" She told him. "That is a beautiful name." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a flower made of folded paper with colors she had never seen before. "This is for you. It is called origami. It is an art from my home." She took it carefully, marveling at how delicate it was. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you giving me this? Why are you here?" The human thought for a moment. "Because a long time ago someone gave my grandmother something when she needed hope, a piece of bread, a kind word. It saved her life." He smiled. "We believe in passing things forward. The kindness we receive we give to others. That is how we build a future worth living in." The girl looked at the paper flower in her hands. She did not fully understand. She was too young to understand. But she would remember. Years later, when she became one of the first to study on Earth, she would tell this story. She would talk about the day a human gave her a flower and told her about hope. And the humans would listen and smile and know that this was how wars truly ended. Not with weapons, not with victories, but with small acts of kindness, passed from hand to hand across generations, until hatred became nothing more than a memory. The human fleet still patrolled the stars. They remained watchful, prepared, and strong, because humans knew better than anyone that peace was not weakness. It was strength that chose not to strike. But they also knew that the best way to protect peace was to make sure everyone had a reason to believe in it. And so they kept reaching out, one world at a time, one person at a time, one paper flower at a time. That was humanity's true victory. And it was only the beginning.